Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new session of the Gerhard Center webinar series. This evening, we are hosting a very important and timely discussion around trends in corporate sustainability. And we are very lucky to have one of the best people to carry and lead such conversation, Tensie Whelan, the clinical professor for business and society. She is the founder and the director of New York Stern School of Business Center for Sustainability. Thank you so much, Tensie, for making the time and accepting to lead today's conversation. Before we start, let me just provide a brief introduction about Tensie. Tensie Whelan is a clinical professor for business and society, and she is the founder and the director of New York Stern School of Business Center for Sustainable Business, where she brings 25 years of experience working on sustainability issues. As president of the Rainforest Alliance, she built the organization from a $4.5 million to $50 million budget, transforming the engagement of business with sustainability, recruiting 5,000 companies in more than 60 countries. Her previous work included serving as an executive director of the New York League of Conservative Voters, vice president of the National Advanced Society, and managing editor of Ambio, a journal of Swedish Academy of Science. She has served on numerous nonprofit boards and corporate advisory board for companies such as Unilever and Nespresso. And currently, she serves on the advisory board of ALO Advisor, Buzz on Earth, Giant Ventures, and Inherit Group. She was most recently appointed to the board of Invest Industrial SPAC and is an advisor to the Future Economy Project for Harvard Business Review, and is a member of the Exploring the Future of Sustainable Production and Consumption Working Group of the Council on Competitiveness. Tensie was awarded the Stern Faculty Excellence Award in 2020. Again, thank you so much, Tensie. We are very much looking forward to an interesting and engaging conversation. And to the audience, as Tensie walks us through her presentation, please prepare your questions and comments, and you'll be engaged in a Q&A discussion after Tensie finishes her presentation. Thank you so much, Tensie. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's a pleasure to be with you and the Gerhard Center. I'm so pleased to be invited to speak, and I look forward to the discussion and questions with people on this call after I finish presenting. I'm going to share my screen, and I was asked to talk a bit about what we're up to at the center. And so, as mentioned earlier, I came to New York University Stern School of Business about 7 years ago to launch the Center for Sustainable Business at Stern. And our focus is on helping current and future business leaders to really embed sustainability core to business strategy in order to drive better societal and financial performance for the companies. And what we're seeing is today, business leaders really need new set of skills, new set of insights in order to transform and guide their companies in a world where issues such as climate change and inequity are having a really significant impact for all of us, but also for corporate performance. We are really at the Center for Sustainable Business. We're focused on research, education, thought leadership. We have a team of both practitioners and academics who are multidisciplinary in their background and have experience in working in corporate sustainability and sustainable finance that they can bring to the research that we do, to our interaction with practitioners, and of course, our educational programs. So I thought I'd share a bit about our research first, and then talk to you a little bit about what we're doing on the educational front. So a big part of our research is focused on the business case for sustainability and the development of a methodology called Rosie, Return on Sustainability Investment. We see, for example, overall, and we did this meta-analysis of more than 1,000 academic studies looking at the correlation between ESG or sustainability and financial performance, These 1,000+ academic studies were published between 2015 and 2020. We found that 58% of the studies found a positive correlation between sustainability and corporate financial performance. Only about 8% found a negative correlation. On the investor side of things, about 33% of the studies found that ESG investing outperformed conventional investing. About 26% found that it performed at par, so similar. And then 14% found a negative correlation between ESG and financial performance. So overall, we can see that there's a significant correlation between sustainability and better financial performance. But that's just a correlation. It's not causality. We don't know what's driving that better performance because, for the most part, corporates are not actually tracking the return on their sustainability investments. They're putting in place good programs, but not actually looking at baselines, figuring out what the financial returns are. So question is, first of all, why not, right? So overall, what we find is that assessing the return on sustainability investment is complicated to implement. For a given company, you probably have several different sustainability strategies, and the implementation of those strategies often show up in many different units, right? It might show up in brand marketing, it might show up in purchasing and procurement, it might show up in in supply chain work or in HR. Also, we see that financial benefits are tracked differently, if at all, by different units, and they're not aggregated back to the sustainability strategy. And I'm going to give you examples of all this. We also find that companies put in place their sustainability strategy without putting in place ways to track the total return from the outset. They might be looking at sort of reduction in energy costs as a result of energy efficiency strategies or increase in sales of a particular sustainable product. But as we'll walk through, there's so much more that they're not tracking. In addition, many benefits of sustainability are intangible and difficult to measure. So impacts on reputation, on employee engagement, on risk mitigation, all intangible. And in fact, when you look at valuation of companies back in the 70s, I think it was something like less than 20% of their value was in intangibles. And today, less than 20% is tangible assets. So 90-something% today is of a company's valuation is in intangible benefits, such as their intellectual property, their reputation, their brand, etc. Also, we see that it's not clear to the finance function generally that there's enough of a financial benefit to justify putting in place the mechanisms for tracking the return on sustainability investment. That is beginning to change as regulation is requiring far more scrutiny of ESG metrics. CFOs are now beginning to get involved because they're on the line in terms of liability. And as they're doing that, they're starting to see the need to begin to track the financial elements as well. Also, investors and board members traditionally have not been asking for the return on sustainability investment. They've been asking for financial metrics and then in some cases ESG metrics, but not how the two relate. And again, that is beginning to change. So we've designed this framework called Rosie that identifies 9 mediating factors that drive better performance when you embed sustainability core to business strategy. These 9 factors include improved customer loyalty, better employee relations, more innovation, better media coverage, operational efficiencies, improved risk management, sales and marketing benefits, and supplier and stakeholder relations benefits, all of which can then drive greater profitability, better valuation, lower cost of capital. Now, any kind of good management can drive better performance in these 9 mediating factors, right? There are things that you can do that can drive more innovation or drive improved sales and marketing or improves employee relations. But what's interesting about sustainability is that we're finding that very often sustainability strategies and practices can drive 3 or 4 of these mediating factors. And in fact, sustainability represents the next wave of total quality management. So how do we move from that kind of broad framework to actually implementing and understanding how we might monetize the return on investment? First, we need to understand what are the material ESG issues and strategies for that particular company, and then what practices they're putting in place to implement against the strategy. And it's at the practice level that we can actually monetize performance. And I'll give you examples of this. And then we look at those practices and define what kind of benefits. Is it driving innovation? Is it driving operational efficiency? And then we figure out how we might quantify, give a unit of measurement in an instance where it's a intangible that's challenging and important to do, and then how we then turn that into a dollar finding. We've been working with a variety of different industries, from food and agriculture to automotive to apparel to pharmaceutical to utilities. And you see here some of the companies, as well as we've been working with financial institutions who are interested in this. So walking you through some examples, we've developed a sustainable agriculture framework where we've identified first what the major sustainability strategies are in the sector that addresses the material ESG issues that they're confronting. As you can see, it's a complex sector with strategies ranging from work focused on climate change to animal welfare to nutrition to sustainable packaging to chemical management to employee and supplier well-being. So a series of different material issues around which these companies need to invest. So to give you some examples then of how the Rosie structure works. So in one, as you saw, one particular strategy is to implement sustainable sourcing in the agricultural space. Down the left, you see 4 practices to do that. The first one being sourcing requirements for suppliers that are not certification. So supplier code of conduct, et cetera. Then we have commitment to sustainability certifications. So in that case, there is an actual certification requirement. The third type of practice is related to supply chain sourcing projects. So there you might have a company that uses a lot of water in their manufacturing, develop a project related to watershed conservation and protection, for example. And then supply chain partnerships being the final type of practice. And there you might see a company giving preferred supplier status to a supplier that's going to help with the sustainability of their sourcing. And you can see here that we've looked at this, we've mapped these different practices across the entire value chain with certain sub-practices, which we can then monetize. So in one example around sustainable sourcing, we worked with McCormick, which is a large spice company that sources things like vanilla and pepper, identified with them working on, I think, 2 or 3 of their iconic ingredients. We looked at the total financial benefit of their sustainable sourcing strategies and found that through improvements in sales and marketing, risk management, earned media, lower cost of capital, there were benefits to them of about $6 million a year with the potential to increase. And again, what we found is that the company itself hadn't looked at or assessed all of these different benefits, and had not seen that actually it was financially viable and deserving of more investment. Another example, mitigating, adapting to climate change. So again, down the left, you'll see the 4 major sets of practices: reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to low carbon alternatives, sequestering carbon, and selling or purchasing offsets. And then you see across the top the different kind of sub-practices across the value chain, depending on whether you're on farm, in manufacturing and distribution, at retail, et cetera. And so here we worked on a project related to beef in Brazil, where we worked with McDonald's and Carrefour to look at both deforestation-free and sustainable agriculture commitments by ranchers. What we found is that the uptake of sustainable agriculture practices resulted in a 7 times increase in profitability for the ranchers, which was driven by 2.3 times increase in productivity, as well as getting a premium for higher quality beef. They went from 0 high quality beef to 70% high quality beef. with about close to $30 million benefit to them over 10 years, which for these ranchers, really significant benefit in terms of income. So in fact, the sustainable agriculture practices generated cash in hand. The deforestation-free commitments were really just avoided risk, which could have resulted in significant negative impact. But the cash in hand enabled the investments to make sure there would be no deforestation. The slaughterhouses also saw benefits. For example, reduced reputational, regulatory, and operational risk. On the operational risk side, if you have ranchers that are far more profitable and also far more sustainable, you're much more likely to have a stable relationship with that supplier, which is really critical. Also getting a higher quality product that you can sell at a premium. And for the retailers, we just looked at the financial benefit for them in Brazil, but again, significant benefit related to risk, talent enhancement, and premiums. Looking at the apparel sector, we have identified 8 sustainability strategies for that sector, again, ranging from kind of the natural resource related strategies across the top, chemical, water, energy, waste, to other strategies such as circularity, sustainable sourcing, employee and supplier well-being, sustainable brand communications. So again, giving you an example of a particular area, we're looking here at investing in employee well-being and supplier well-being across the supply chain. So here down the left-hand side, again, 4 types of practices. One is ensuring fair compensation and increasing wages. The second is improving workforce diversity. The third is increasing employee sustainability training and engagement. And finally, benefit programs. And you can see here again across the value chain different ways that this can manifest. This is from the perspective of a brand. So the brand, for example, might ask that their suppliers are ensuring a living wage for the workers there, or might require certain labor certifications, et cetera. So we worked with REI, which is an activewear apparel company based here in the US that is very well known for its focus on purpose and sustainability. And so they also have a very robust set of surveys to understand why people come to work with them, what makes them productive, why they stay, why they leave, et cetera. And what we found compared to industry averages is that they had significant reduced turnover and increased productivity, which we would then monetize to understand sort of the avoided cost associated with that turnover and also the revenue benefits of the increased productivity, subtracting some mission-aligned investments related to they give their people paid time off to go volunteer for environmental groups, for example. Total net benefit of $34 million for this company, which was about 5% of payroll expenses. So a really quite significant sort of on the top benefit of them really investing in sustainability. Another area that's becoming very much central to a lot of apparel companies is a focus on circularity. And again, down the left, you'll see the 4 major circular practices. One is to invest in circular product take-back programs, another in circular packaging solutions, the third, minimizing production waste and increasing product longevity, and finally, reducing product returns, which in today's world where we're seeing more and more focus on e-commerce and also lots and lots of return clothes that people weren't happy with, real significant environmental impacts. So you can see here again, the different kinds of sub-practices that we look at across the whole value chain, with consumers being an important part of this because not much though not all, is related to consumers bringing used product back into the ecosystem. So an example was our work with Eileen Fisher, which is a privately held clothing company that makes clothing for women. They decided to develop a take-back program called Renew, where they provided a coupon to customers who returned their gently used clothing. Eileen Fisher then took the clothing and either cleaned and repaired it for resale or converted it into felt. And that felt then was made into bags or wall hangings or other types of things. What they found from this, first of all, they made a good profit on the Renew line. It was popular, people bought it, and they had a relatively low margin associated with it. The coupon itself was very well subscribed, so they were able actually to bring in a lot of new sales as a result of people using the coupon, which didn't cover, obviously, the full amount of anything additional that they were purchasing. But the biggest benefit for them was around customer acquisition because they had struggled to reach a younger demographic. Their demographic tends to be women my age. So they, through this program and with no marketing, right, were able to really bring in a significant number of younger generation who then, hopefully will remain loyal and become ongoing customers of Eileen Fisher. And then finally, they got a lot of really significant earned media, which they didn't have to pay for. So we went through and monetized all of these different elements for a total net benefit after cost of $1.8 million in 2019 when we did this study. And again, that's a pretty significant number for this for a smallish company like Eileen Fisher. So that's a bit about that return on sustainability investment work we're doing. We have a lot of other examples. It is all open source. There are tools, et cetera, available on our website. So feel free to take a look there and you'll see a lot more material about it. Similarly, for this research initiative, you will also find a much longer presentation on our website. But we've been looking at consumer purchasing of sustainable products in the consumer packaged goods space. I got interested in this when I was running Rainforest Alliance because I kept hearing from marketing directors that, there's a green gap. People say they want to buy sustainable products, but then they don't, or they won't pay a premium. So when I came to Stern, I asked sort of what's the research out there? And what we found in doing a research review is that actually virtually all of the research was surveys. It was surveying whether you were planning to buy sustainable products and surveying whether you actually bought products. It wasn't actually purchasing data. So, surveys are notoriously problematic because people say things that may or may not be correct, right? So we then partnered with a company called IRI, which is a market research firm that collects all of our barcode data on all consumer packaged good products in the United States, sold in the United States, in everything from small mom and pop shops to Amazon and Walmart and bricks and mortar, as well as e-commerce. We've been doing this every year since 2019. And in 2019, we looked 5 years back. So we're kind of have a great history of performance in this space. And it's the only study that we know of that really looks broadly at an entire sector in terms of actual purchasing on an annual basis. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, consumer packaged goods includes 3 categories: food products, personal care products, and home care products. So what we found in the US is that as of end of 2021, about 17% of all products in consumer packaged goods had sustainability attributes. We did not include anything called natural because it doesn't mean anything. Had we included that, it probably would have been higher. And we did not include anything that was cause-related marketing. In other words, a claim that said 1% for the planet because it wasn't including anything in the product. And we did not include packaging claims because, again, we were focused on what was in the product. So 17% of the market, but interestingly, responsible for 32% of the growth in CPG over this 2015 to 2021 period. So sustainability marketed products are growing close to 3 times faster than conventionally marketed products and 2 times faster than the CPG market overall. And they're doing that at a really significant premium, right? The highest level of the premium was back in 2018, where it was close to 40%, which is huge. It went down a bit in 2021 and then down a little bit more in the beginning of 2022. We'll look at this again. We do this report every March, so we'll look at this again at the end of this year. The reason it went down in 2021, there were two reasons. The first was that conventional products had not been able to take any price increases. The retailers wouldn't let them do that for a number of years. And due to inflation in 2021, they were finally able to take price increases, which reduced the gap between the sustainable products and the conventional products. In addition, a number of companies came in with large legacy brands that they have converted to a sustainable offering that they were able to offer at a lower price. So we also saw, while they still took premiums, a lower premium. I, by the way, think that we should have lower premiums. I think there should be a premium, but I think even at a 27% premium, my experience in CPG is that companies might be paying 2 to 3%. So they're taking huge premiums, which then will reduce the ability for people with less ability to pay premiums like that to purchase the product. And I think over time, we will see this premium narrow, which I think is probably a good thing. Although I do think we should have some premium over the longer term. Another area that we looked at is sort of what's happening in the different categories. So you can see here, we've been sort of putting them into less than 5% share, between 5 and 20% and 20% share. One of my questions when we first started this was, well, we know that about 10 to 15% of the population really care about sustainability. So will we get to that kind of threshold and then just stay there? Or are we going to see this all mainstreamed? So interestingly, what we've been seeing is continued movement by the categories over to the right. So on the left, in the middle group, you'll see toothpaste, deodorant, and sanitary napkins in green. They moved from less than 5% share over the last 2 years into that middle group. And then you see in the plus 20% share, all those categories in green moved over from less than 20% over the last 2 years into the plus 20%. Another really telling point is that for yogurt, where we currently see 75% of all yogurt sold in the United States has some type of sustainability claim. And for milk, it's about 65% have some type of sustainability claim. Those categories of sustainability offering is still growing faster than conventional, even at that market saturation. So in yogurt at 75%, the sustainably marketed products are growing at about plus 10%. The conventional are growing at a minus or have a deficit of minus 10%. And milk is a similar expression. So our analysis is pointing towards this being an ongoing trend with those companies that are really investing in sustainable products continuing to grow market share. We also looked last year looked over a number of years at the percentage of new products introduced and sold that have sustainability attributes. And what you can see here is that in 2021, 1 out of every 2 new products introduced and sold in CPG had some type of sustainability attribute. So you can see clearly that companies are recognizing that there's a real shift here and that the product mix is really changing to offer more sustainability marketed products. In one expression of that, we've been tracking sales of carbon labeled products. So in 2021, $3.4 billion of carbon labeled product was sold in CPG, up from about $1.3 billion in 2020, up from next to zero in 2019. So again, a real growth in demand and purchasing of carbon labeled products. And then I'm just showing you, we do a variety of different demographic information. Again, you can see all of this on our website, but just to show you one element of this, we looked at different cohorts in terms of age, and green is over-indexing, yellow is indexing, and red is under-indexing. So for example, a category like yogurt, where 75% of all yogurt has some type of sustainability claim, you can see here that that's showing up as yellow across all 4 cohorts. So all 4 cohorts are buying sustainably marketed yogurt at a 75% level. You can see that millennials tend to over-index in a number of categories. Generation X tends to index, boomers mostly index with a little bit of under-indexing, and seniors and retirees being the least likely to purchase sustainable products. You can also see on the right that currently Generation X and boomers have more more wallet share than millennials, but that is also changing over time. And then my final piece of research that I'm going to share with you is around our work looking at ESG credentials of board members. So we looked at 1,188 Fortune 100 board directors. This was a couple of years ago. What we found is that 21% of the board members had relevant experience in the S, and about 6% had relevant experience in environment and in governance. That sounds bad, but it's even worse when you look at the fact that only 3 board members out of 1,188 had background in climate. Only 8 out of 1,188 had background in cybersecurity, right? And even on the social side, there's nobody who had experience in worker voice, right? Worker issues. There was a decent amount focused on workplace diversity and background, but again, some challenges around the types of experience levels here. And, this is relevant in that, when you look at different verticals, right? Healthcare, consumer staples, telecommunications had a decent percentage of board members with ESG credentials. But in areas like transportation, which has huge, climate implications, resiliency, as well as impact, nobody with climate credentials and next to no background in ESG. Similarly, looking at, for example, a property and casualty insurance company with really significant impacts on them related to climate change, nobody with climate credentials. Or a do-it-yourself company. So this is a company that sells, products for you to work on home construction or gardening or things like that. Again, very few credentials associated with ESG, and the company itself didn't talk about any of the ESG credentials of their board members even when they existed. And then a pharmaceutical company that has had massive lawsuits around opioid crisis, has a series of environmental and social and governance challenges. Nobody on the board with ESG credentials. So I think we're getting close to time, so I will just whip quickly through some of the education and career development work we're doing. We work with, we have programs with undergraduates, MBAs, executive MBAs, online certificates, executive online certificates, both bespoke for companies and general enrollment. This just gives you a sense of some of the numbers of the students. We also work very hard on ensuring that they have access to experiential learning. So we'll do MBA consulting projects. We do fellowships with companies. We do training. We do executive and residence courses, a whole series of ways to engage with our MBAs. These are some of the courses that we offer. They have to take a foundational course, which is a strategy course called Sustainability for Competitive Advantage. And then they can choose between a variety of other opportunities ranging from accounting and sustainability to marketing. We've also created at the MBA level a program to get more women into sustainable finance, as we see that this is a real, just like all business schools, unfortunately, it tends to be sort of 25% women graduate with a specialization in finance. And yet we also find that women seem to be, though there's plenty of men interested in this, but women tend to be more interested in kind of societal impact. So we've developed a program that's funded by Visa Foundation to support more women going into sustainable finance and providing them with mentors, high-powered women in the sustainable finance space, as well as extracurricular training and support. This, I mentioned the MBA summer fellowships we do with a variety of different companies. We do case competitions as well. Our undergraduates also have a series of courses that they can take. They have to choose we want them to sort of take issues, disciplines, and practicums. So we divide it up a little more. We give them a little more of a straitjacket. We also do, we have a boot camp for them around sustainability careers. We provide internships. We provide a jobs board and training. So other ways that we support them with their help. And then, as I mentioned, we're doing executive education in a variety of different ways, both with asynchronous courses where you can enroll over the course of a semester to online, but in real-time courses. So I'm going to stop there and open it up. And I think, I hit my time. So open it up to you, Kaiwan.
Thank you so much, Tensie. It's great work, very impressive. And I can only imagine the amount of work and resources you put in this kind of research. For the audience, please prepare your questions and raise your hand, and then you can address your questions directly to Tensie. But before that, Tensie, let me ask you a question. One of the main challenges of working at the intersection between business and social spaces is the language. The language used in both spaces could differ. The business language is not always welcome in social spaces and the other way around. So your center has done a great work in bridging this gap. I wonder, how do you navigate this language barrier and be able to carry proper multidisciplinary conversations and dialogues between scholars and practitioners in both spaces? Like, any lesson learned?
Yes. So I myself come from a practitioner background, having run an NGO, as you mentioned earlier. And most of my team are practitioners. So we, I think, find it relatively easy to speak that language. The language of business, whether it's talking about, sort of business plan criteria or marketing needs or other types of things. On the academic front, what we tend to do there is partner with academics that are very interested in more practical hands-on research, who then bring in the academic language and rigor to the articles that they publish in academic journals. So we've done a fair amount of work with the sustainable marketing work, for example, with an academic here who is publishing it in major marketing journals. And our team members will be co-authors on that, but the lead will come from the sort of tenured professors who have a PhD in that subject. So that's often how we're managing for that. I see a question from Rehab. Should I?
Okay. Yeah, Rehab, if you please unmute yourself and address the question.
Thank you. Yes, I have two questions actually. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. My maybe easier question is about ESG credentials. When you say board members lack the credentials, am I to understand the credential being certain kind of certification or degree, as the examples you mentioned integrated in the Stern program, sustainable courses, or is it mostly in their background and practical experience?
Yeah, we looked at the background and practical experience. So we looked, for example, are they on the boards of any organizations that might be working on sustainability? Did they have a position in the past that focused on sustainability? Do they have any other credentials that they talk about? So we looked at two sources. One was in the United States, you report to the Securities Exchange Commission. your board member credentials. So we looked there, and then we looked at the websites of the companies where they list their board members. So some of them may have had ESG training or other types of credentials, but we figured if they didn't put them in the two legally important places, they weren't seeing them as important, right? So that's where we did our analysis. And we also, it's a fairly subjective process because, in some cases, people sit on boards of, let's say, a community organization that's helping inner city kids get more education, right? And that's great on the social side. But if it wasn't tied into anything to do with what the company was doing, we did not include it, even if they, sort of personally seemed to be invested in that. We were looking for things that had direct implications. So in terms of recommendations, while I certainly wouldn't sort of say that companies should be hiring climate scientists for their board, if we're just focusing on climate for a minute, they should be bringing onto the board people who have experience in climate. It could be leaders of major NGOs. It could be chief sustainability officers from other companies. It could be CEOs from companies that have a climate focus. It could be investors that have been focusing on climate finance, right? So there's a series of ways you could bring in that expertise without having to sort of go the scientist route. But I also do think that bringing in academics who can have that kind of perspective is useful to companies. And we see it, interestingly, the place you see it is in healthcare companies. Healthcare companies tend to bring in academics and people who have other background in social topics in particular, though actually the healthcare sector has really significant environmental impacts. They're responsible for about 5% of global carbon emissions. In this country, they're responsible for 8% of our emissions in the US. So actually a significant environmental impact. You don't see that at all on their boards, but you do see more of investment on the social side and bringing in more academics and people who run nonprofits related to healthcare. So I think that is a place where other companies can learn.
Okay, and I have another question, please. The sustainability premium for sustainability marketed product, it increased and now is declining a little bit. But I'm always puzzled by this. I understand businesses need to make money and profit and redeem the investment they make for being sustainable/green. But why would the consumer who cares about the future of the planet have to pay extra money to be less polluting? I just can't get my head around this.
Companies are charging more because they can. And so other research that I didn't show in there shows the price sensitivity. So interestingly, consumers are less price sensitive if a product is sustainable. Those consumers that have less income, so even more lower income consumers, at least for certain products that they care about, certain product categories. So so the companies are charging it because they can get away with it, which, as I said, I think is a problem.
It is, honestly, because as a consumer, it's just not fair. If I want to do my part and reduce my footprint, I should not be paying more. I should actually be encouraged to do that.
Right. And I think that
I'm a business consultant, by the way. I'm a strategy consultant for businesses. So it's quite baffling.
Yeah, well, I have two thoughts on this. One is that I think as consumers, we have been socialized into paying too little for some things, right? So the reason why we have factory farming, for example, is that the price per unit is what we've gotten used to. And you can't actually do responsible animal farming at the price point that people want for a factory farm product, right? Secondly, we also see really significant sort of downward pressure that has negative impacts on workers in the space as a result of kind of pushing the margins. So I do think we need more. We as consumers need to recognize that we are underpaying in many cases, and externalities are taking the brunt of it, right? And so actually getting our products up to a slightly higher price point that better reflects what the real costs are, I think is actually important. That said, I think that's 3 to 5%. I mean, it's going to vary on the category, but that's 3 to 5%, not 40%, not 28%. And we also need to make sure that people who have less income than we might have be able to purchase sustainable products, not paying such a horrific premium.
And it also varies by country, of course, because, for example, in Egypt, it's a completely different dynamic in terms of cost versus margin versus profitability of companies. But we are also very early in the early days of consumer awareness for sustainability demand. So I'll just leave the floor to others. But thank you so much. Really helpful.
Absolutely. Ali, I think you have a.
Okay, thank you, Tensie, for a very nice presentation. My question is about how do you verify the sustainability? I mean, when you talk for most of the time, the issue, for example, in carbon emissions is what is referred to as scope 3, which is you're really gonna outsource it to someone who's gonna outsource it, so you ended up being it in the nth degree. Same with human rights violation, for example. It's rarely within the company or in a first year. It's usually. Now, how do you verify this first? Well, second, if you want to do it properly, it's going to make it extremely expensive. And it's going to make it for many of the companies not a level field for competition. So you really have to get the government intervening either to sort of force it or to give sort of a tax break or an incentive for people who are actually doing it right. So I'm asking about two things. I'm asking about how do you verify scope 3 or complicity, or how do you, and then the price. If you're going to do it audit, they're going to be expensive. Who's going to pay for the price?
Yeah. So let me start with the second part of your question. So that's why we've been doing this return on sustainability investment research. And actually what we're finding is that there are significant benefits to investing in sustainability beyond a price premium for selling the product or service. And that in fact, for example, if you pay your workers better and treat them better, you have improved you have improved retention and improved productivity, lower costs in terms of turnover and training, as well as in many cases, lower costs in terms of negative worker outcomes related to sort of safety and other things. And in fact, one of the challenges with how companies do their accounting is they don't actually track the costs of that, the challenge of low productivity and low retention on their bottom line. They just look at the cost, the wages cost. And so if you look at, we've been looking at some of this around retail restaurant operations. So if you look at Domino's, big kind of global pizza company, they have a turnover rate between 150 and 200% annually. They pay their people nothing. The benefits are nothing. It's horrible. You've got, they've got to recruit and hire 180,000 people to fill 114,000 spots each year. It takes them a month to train the person till they're ready, that they can actually make the pizzas adequately, fast, quickly, and do the register and take the phone calls and do everything else that they're supposed to do. So they train them for a month and then they leave, right? In addition, because their workers are so unhappy and not trained, they have a really low customer satisfaction level. So the way they've addressed that is that they have a free, like if you don't like your pizza, if it isn't what you want, we'll replace it for free. So they have all these costs, that free pizza, the training, the lack of retention, the customer service challenges that they are not actually tracking. I'll give you another example more on the environmental side, right? So when you're looking at scope 3 on carbon, but you could also be looking at impacts related to chemicals or water or other types of things, companies tend to look at waste and emissions as a compliance issue that costs them money. But in fact, waste management is the ultimate in addressing an operational inefficiency, to use the business language as you asked before, Kaiman. So you're buying more than you need to pay to dispose of what's left over, right? So an example would be we looked at a pulp and paper company that was getting in quote unquote free water into their pulp and paper processing. They don't pay for water in the Southeast of the United States. The chief sustainability officer said, we should be reducing our water because they're using an enormous amount of water in pulp and paper. The mill manager said, why? We don't pay for it. He did an analysis, and what he found is that by moving all that water around, you actually have to use a lot of energy to move it around. You have a lot of energy to heat and cool it. And you also have a huge volume of waste to dispose of. All that free water was costing them $1.5 million per year per mill, right? So again, that kind of mindset of not looking at cohesive, sort of in a coherent way, the actual impacts of your work, whether it's in your own production or in the companies that you're sourcing from, there's a huge amount of opportunity for the suppliers to make money in ways that will offset any costs they have to invest in improving the sustainability of their practices. The first question you had was around how do we track and assess scope 3 for carbon emissions in our supply chain. And so there's a number of tools that have been developed for Business Council for Sustainable Development, the Science Based Targets Initiative, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, We Mean Business Coalition. So there's a series of different opportunities and partnerships out there. There's also, all the major consulting firms are working on solutions that they can offer. There's also increasingly enterprise data solutions. So SAP now has their cloud-based sustainable enterprise solution that looks at supply chain management. There's companies looking at water risk in your supply chain and how do you assess it and work with your suppliers using artificial intelligence. So I think those sets of tools, while we're really at a nascent level, are growing and will be more and more available to companies to better assess and track impact in the supply chains.
Thank you so much, Tensie. Let me ask you a question, like a final one before we go. It relates to the issue of research funding in sustainability in general. Wealth is created mostly by businesses, so at the very least, businesses would influence to a big extent the direction of the social discourse. How do you as a center navigate the imbalance in this power dynamics when it comes to the issue of research funding? And what are your recommendations for smaller research centers or think tanks or research efforts that are still immature? How can we manage this imbalances in the power dynamics?
And so I have to raise all the funds for my center. So I'm in the same, NYU does not fund my center. So just in the same place that everybody else is. I came to Stern with having raised money in my previous work. And what I find actually is that a lot of folks in my position don't have that background in fundraising. So that can be, a challenge. And so getting support and engagement from people who have fundraised can help. So let me just say that different sources of funding that I have. One is I've created an advisory board of people who actually, both of alums and others who contribute and make a commitment to a significant gift annually. And that money comes without strings, right? That's for us generally, for us to decide where we put it. Secondly, the executive education courses that I do, while the school gets a percentage of it, the bulk of it goes back into our general support funds, which then funds both our educational work and our research work. Third, we go to foundations to get funding for some of the research. So we've got now a grant coming in for our Rosie work around decarbonization of the healthcare sector from a foundation that is focused on healthcare. And then finally, in terms of corporate funding, so in some cases, it'll be corporate foundations where, again, there's no strings associated with it. You just need to be very clear about that. So HSBC, for example, very interested in our Rosie work, has funded our work in agriculture. We go out, find the companies, we do the research. They don't interfere with that at all. But for them, they're interested in it because they want their clients to adapt more sustainability work. So they think that it's a useful approach. The other area where we raise funds directly from corporations is more where we're doing some kind of, in effect, consulting work with them that is plugging into our broader goals. So we don't do consulting for the sake of consulting. And also in consulting, there are a number of requirements because we're an academic organization, right? So one is that we need to have a publicly facing kind of communication, case study, et cetera, around the work. And secondly, that obviously there's no there's no sort of undue influence, right, in the research. And so there we go out ourselves and recruit companies where we can kind of, for example, do some Rosie analysis, where we established from the outset that the tools that we developed through that engagement remain RIP. The work remains RIP. We will be publishing a public study. However, there will be confidential information for them that will stay theirs as a result of that work. And that's fine with us because there'll be proprietary information as a result of the work that we don't need to share with the world. We just need to be able to share an example, like I showed you some of those examples with Cargill or McCormick or others.
Thank you so much, Tensie. That was a great conversation, and we really appreciate you making the time and effort to be here with us. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody. Thank you to the audience and everybody for engaging in this conversation. We are looking forward to seeing you in the coming GC webinar series in spring, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.